Well, we're here today to talk about overcoming strategic challenges in content marketing. So I'm first going to ask you, are these things that you can relate to? Because these are the challenges that a lot of the small businesses that I've worked with have faced. My audience is narrow and niche. Our keywords have very low search volume. Or we have an endless list of content needs and we haven't even scratched the surface. Or our budget for content marketing is limited. How do we prioritize? So I'm going to be sharing with you some tips that I've learned along the way in order to help address some of these challenges. But the challenges don't stop there. There are also challenges with content marketing in general. It takes a long time to deliver those results. It takes a long time to get, indexed by Google. The quality content is expensive to create, so you need to, invest properly in order to be able to cut through the clutter and really engage the minds of your buyers. And finally, Google is favoring customer-centric content. How do I do that? Where do I start? So we'll be addressing these challenges as well. So I'd first like to know if you can identify with this, because I think this is how people feel in the marketplace. There is just so much content out there. How is it helping me? So I think we have to recognize that audiences are inundated. They want things that are relevant to them and only relevant to them. They want you to curate it for them. We can get better performance and better ROI when we can develop more relevant content. And in doing so, we can also reach a market more cost effectively. So I'd like to say that with an efficient marketing mix that includes relevant intercepts, we can overcome those challenges. So let's talk about what this means.
Excellent.
So how are you going to create a content strategy that's going to allow you to win? So it really starts with those customer insights. And building on that, how are you going to generate awareness before you even think about the content that you're going to write? Because if you can do those two things at the core of the circle, well, your content is going to perform that much better. And it's going to be that much more relevant and that much more meaningful to customers.
Could you give us an example of an awareness generator?
Oh, good question. So, for example, and I'll go through a few examples through my presentation. For example, it might be something like figuring out where your customers consume information or share. Maybe it's at a meetup. Maybe if you're a student at a school, maybe it's through a school presentation. So it's figuring out that the heart of what's going to develop the awareness the fastest. In a B2B situation, it could be as simple as coming to a trade event or a conference in order to consume the material there. So figuring out what's going to be at the core of engaging that audience and developing awareness is key, because it'll give you a lot of insights into who your customer is and what's important to them. And then if you can build your content on that, it's going to be that much more effective.
Is it an asset type or a distribution channel or both?
It could be both.
Okay.
Could be both. So really good questions. We'll get into some examples that I've experienced with clients of what these awareness generators could be, but it could be a lot of different things.
Okay.
And finally, focusing on how to amplify what's working well organically. How to figure out how to amplify it with paid is a way to get even more efficiency out of the mix and leverage even more that great content that you've created. So if you walk away from just one thing from this presentation, it's that if when you're developing your content, you're thinking about developing relevant intercepts, that will help you to develop content that will win.
Another dumb question from the audience, namely me, the dumb audience.
No dumb questions.
Could you define relevant intercepts?
Ooh.
It's a great phrase, but I don't understand really what that means.
Great. Relevant intercepts is when you think about the customer and their intent journey and develop those intercepts that are going to be relevant to them at each point in time. So I'll get to a framework on the next slide that explains that. But I would like to at least let everyone know that content is more effective when it's defined as part of your marketing mix. And I would say that at a very high level, the circles on this slide define a marketing mix. I have a 5-step process for defining that marketing mix, which is going to include that effective content and address the development of relevant intercepts. And I will
Awesome.
also say that this works for B2B and B2C.
Awesome.
All right. So relevant intercepts are based on intent. And I'm going to walk you through this slide from top to bottom. So intent comes in roughly 3 stages. There are customers who might be need unaware. They don't know that they have a problem. This is what I would consider to be a low intent audience. And then there's an audience that might know they have a problem, but they really haven't started looking for a solution. So they're really not searching. So this would be solution unaware. So need aware, but solution unaware. And finally, there's a stage of active evaluation where there's a high intent scenario where they're really searching for something and they're trying to evaluate. So let's talk about the relevant intercepts at each stage. So in a low intent scenario, it might be, you might want to interrupt them with something like how to achieve your dream test scores in less than 30 days if you're a student, or 5 tips to a stronger balance sheet, or top 10 concerns for parents of preschoolers. Just something pretty broad that most of your target audience might respond to, even if they're not thinking about the problem that they have. And then to think about relevant intercepts in the middle box, those who are aware that they have a problem, but they're not really looking for a solution yet. You want to kind of get them into solution evaluation mode. So intercepts such as the best way to study for the MCAT, guaranteed, or 10 tips to manage your data securely without hassle, or expert recommended apps for better sleep habits, for example. Those might be things that would address a problem that they know they have, but they haven't actually started looking for solutions. And the content that you can create can start to introduce those solution options, of which your product or your brand might be one of them. And finally, in the active evaluation stage, this is when they're really looking for answers. They might be comparing brand A or brand B, which is more effective. Or they might be evaluating, what do I need to know when I'm buying this? What are some of those must-have features for a home security system? Or what do I look for when I'm refinancing my home? So these are people who have a problem, they're looking for a solution, and they want to make sure that they choose the best one. The content that you create will hopefully show that your brand or company is the best one. But it's delivered as an intercept that's going to get somebody to pay attention. Did that answer your question, Byron?
It does, but would you vary the tone, the style, the length, the type of assets, or the distribution channels with any of these variables, the assets that you're creating, the content that you're...
Absolutely, absolutely. This concept of relevant intercepts doesn't dictate a length, a style, a tone, a channel, or a specific type of asset. This is an approach to thinking about what it is you need to communicate to the customer at which point in time in order to be effective, and determining what channel, what asset, tone, style. Some of that comes from understanding who your customer is and the journey they're on, but it's not necessarily something that the relevant intercept framework dictates.
Notice you're not talking about features and benefits of any of the examples that you're giving here, right?
Exactly.
Yet, when you tell a marketer, talk about our solutions or talk about activating, our software, like they're going to immediately think we need to tell them how our product works. We need to tell them our features about. We need to sell to them. But what you're suggesting is that's not a relevant intercept.
Well, at some point, you will need to deliver that information, right?
Yeah.
But what I find is that when people are defining their content marketing program, there's so much to think about. And there's so many things that you could write about that everything just gets kind of muddy. And then people don't necessarily know, well, what am I trying to measure with this content? Or what am I really trying to drive with this content? It's a little bit messy, right? Because the thinking has been all over the map. But the relevant intercept framework organizes the potential content pieces that you might put together in terms of the buyer or the prospect, and really trying to address what they need at the point when it's going to be relevant.
Got it.
So it's a framework. Yeah. Okay, so let's go through the 5-step process that I talked about. The first one starts with insights. What is your customer why? Who is most likely to recommend or share? How and where do they share most naturally? And what kind of language do they use? And the example I would like to talk about here is Zuka disc golf carts. So in the disc golf market, when I was working with Zuka, there were several very entrenched competitors. So we were late to market. But what we did was we really understood the customer for the carts. And really the customer for the carts was the amateur player that didn't want to carry discs in a bag on their back, that didn't have caddies at tournaments, that played pretty frequently, but didn't necessarily have solutions because they didn't necessarily have caddies. So sometimes they wanted a place to sit while they were playing. And so this is why Zuka disc golf carts became really popular with disc golfers, because it really addressed all of their core needs for the amateur. So that's where we focused. We focused on the amateur player who was active in tournaments, wanted to develop a better game, and saw disc golf carts as a way to do it. And then once we had that insight, that built our marketing mix, our marketing program. Our awareness generator was actually sponsoring amateur tournaments and giving units to active players. And then we built on top of that a content marketing program that built on those insights and also helped to nurture people in the audience who were interested in a cart and maybe they were thinking about it and they weren't clear on the features and the benefits. The content that we made at that point was that much more effective because we knew who our core audience was.
Got it.
So step 2 is to understand how you're going to build that audience generator. And it's different for B2C versus B2B, but you can figure out what your audience awareness generator is going to be for either. So who is in your sweet spot? These are going to be the enthusiasts who are going to share most naturally. Where will you find them most efficiently? How and when are they ready to receive your message? And how do you get those authentic referrals to happen? It's what I call V factor, when you can really get your customers to sell for you. So it's really understanding what are those instances where this might happen. And
what does the V stand for?
V, viral. Good question. Viral factor. You want to get that viral factor going so that the customers will actually do the selling for you. Okay. So the example that I like to speak to is online coding for kids. So when I was working in this with this company, this was back when coding for kids wasn't necessarily as popular as it is now. We figured out that the people who were most likely to share about coding for kids were parents of kids ages 8 to 12, which is when they wanted them to start coding. And they wanted their kids to excel academically. So these were parents who would take their kids to after-school programs, museums, events. When we started to do hackathons with after-school programs, they were the first ones to sign up. What we realized was that this audience liked to see what their kids were doing. And when they saw what their kids were doing and they were impressed by what they saw, they would tell other parents. And oftentimes in these situations, like at children's museums, there would be parents talking to other parents about what they saw. And so that was what we realized was our awareness generator, was creating those events that were going to get those parents to share. I'd like to bring up another example for B2B, which was somewhat similar, but a little bit different. So I was working with Purview Software, who was trying to position their software platform for hospitals and universities that were interested in bringing innovative programs into the institution. So, and what that would do is it would adopt the platform for referral and second opinion programs. So this platform made it really easy for physicians to gather the information and the records that they needed and to share it with other physicians in order to get those second opinions to happen. So the way that we created an awareness generator for Purview Software was to host events where we would invite these thought leaders, and we would invite clients and prospects that we knew to speak about developing these innovative programs, and they would in turn bring their colleagues, because their colleagues wanted to know what was happening at Yale and Sloan Kettering. So it was a really low lift way to create engagement at top of funnel when people weren't necessarily interested in setting up a conversation. They weren't even thinking about second opinion programs, but they wanted to know what the latest and greatest was that was happening at at Dayton Children's or UCLA Children's, for example. So it became our awareness generator, and then we built our content marketing program around that. So
How were you
hopefully
able
I've
to,
answered that
yeah,
question.
how were you able to observe and or research what was going on there, much like you did in the B2C example that you gave? And was that the purpose of this B2B exercise that you did?
Well, so I think what you're asking is how did we arrive at this awareness generator being one that was efficient for
Yes,
us?
exactly. Exactly.
It came from some early conversations that we had with people who bought our platform and people who were thinking about our platform that we just happened to run into. And we would ask them, what is it that would get your colleagues to think about this? What kinds of conversations do they want to have? How did you arrive at the conclusion that developing a second opinion program was something that would be right for your hospital? And by understanding those insights, we were able to formulate this event series as an awareness generation program. So it all starts from the customer insights.
Got it.
All right. So now we've figured out who our customer is, how they buy, how we're going to get that core interest going. And that's really how we're going to drive people to the content and get the content shared more and more, right? Because we've gotten that engine at the center. So now it's time to develop the content. And as you know, it starts with figuring out what your keywords are going to be. So looking at your high conversion keywords through Google Analytics or Search Console, looking for those high conversion keywords, then high volume and long tail keywords in order to get more qualified traffic. Identifying those topical clusters that you're going to write about, and then mapping the keywords within those topical clusters to the intent stages, as I explained earlier. So the example I'd like to talk about here is mortgage brokerage. So when I worked with this company, when we did the keyword research, we noticed that jumbo loans was a really big, high conversion keyword topical cluster that we could build off of. The long tail version of jumbo loan was jumbo loan rates. People who are searching up rates are getting a little bit more serious. But we also looked at intent. High intent might be something like jumbo loan lenders in New York City, right? That shows that somebody's really looking for someone to help solve their problem. So by taking this topical cluster, taking the keywords within it, mapping it out to the intent, that's how we formulated the blueprint for our content marketing program. Another topical cluster might be no-doc loans. And so when you look at no-doc loans and you look at higher intent and lower intent, a lower intent topic might be, what is a no-doc loan? Someone trying to understand what it is, as opposed to trying to find no-doc loan lenders in New York City, for example. So it's figuring out what are the topical clusters, what are the keywords within that, what's going to perform, and then what is lower intent, and then what is a higher intent topic, leveraging those keywords. And that's when you can start to develop those relevant intercepts. So the other example that I have is the Picmonic study app. So they went through the process. Step one, figuring out their target audience groups, and they segmented them by role, use case, needs, service. Then they figured out those intent-based keywords and then the content titles that commanded attention. So a little bit about their business. They are a study app for med and nursing students, and they branched out into pre-med students. And what they figured out was these students are studying for exams. And when they're studying for exams, that's when they need the study app. And they also figured out that the students are also studying using books like First Aid and other textbooks that had brand names to them. And in that way, we could do some middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel intent-based content titles. In addition, when looking at pre-med students, they're considering med school. So there was a lot that we could do with pre-med students at the top of the funnel using some of those keywords. And this is what their map looked like. So we called this at the time the multi-entry point map, but really what it's doing is it's identifying those relevant intercepts for each segment of the population at each stage of the awareness funnel. So need unaware might be something like, how do I survive med school? Or how do we become a successful nursing student? Or what are med schools looking for in a candidate? But at the bottom of the funnel, it might be something like, Picmonic versus Sketchy Medical, or Picmonic versus RN Mastery. Those were the other leading competitors that were out there in the market. Or it might be something very specific, like ace your board exams or pass the NCLEX the first time. So that's how we took what we learned about their customer and how it segments out and how they become more aware of looking for a solution. This is how we mapped it into the relevant intercepts framework.
Question. When you're performing an audit, a content audit for a client, are you working it within this structure? Are you trying to say, okay, how much content do we have that's in the need unaware, segment 1, 2, 3? Are you creating a map to try to pinpoint holes that might be missing, or evaluate the quality of the content that exists now, and to also offer inspiration to develop new topics that broaden the reach? Tell us mechanically how you're working with a client, probably right from the get-go.
Yeah, actually, that is a great point, and that is exactly what I do. Is if there's already a content marketing program in place, we'll do a baseline. We'll take a look at the high-performing content. We'll look at the keywords that are performing well. We'll start from the bottom of the funnel. What is the conversion rate off of certain pieces of content, if we can map to that, or at least what is the click-through rate on some of that content. We'll look at whether the content's gotten a lot of backlinks. That might factor into how we look at this as well. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're taking the high-performing content and we're mapping it into this relevant intercept framework. And sometimes the change that we might make, and if it's doing really well, probably we won't make a lot of changes. But the change that we might make is to maybe tighten up the CTAs, or try to silo the content so it's not spread too thin, so that it'll perform better over time. So by putting it into a framework like this, we are able to tell ourselves this is the role that piece of content plays, and this is how it works in the funnel. And then we can also identify the gaps that we'll need to fill in as well with new content.
Fantastic. Thanks for the answer.
Cool. This is the template that I've developed for you in order to be able to apply this relevant intercepts concept. So I've put in a few bullets that will prompt you on the kinds of things to think about when you're filling in this template. And as you saw in the Picmonic example, you could also do this segment by segment or audience by audience. Okay, so now you've figured out your content.
Can you go back to that slide for a second? I just had an idea for you that I want to run by you. Don't you think this is a really interesting opportunity for sales people to actually look at something like this and say, wow, let's try to really assess where this prospect customer is in the funnel, and let's direct them to content that would be relevant for where they are in the funnel?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because going through this framework analysis can also help align marketing and sales.
Yeah.
Because marketing is developing the content, sales is having the conversations with the customers, and they're needing to follow up, and knowing what content they have at the ready in order to support different types of conversations is helpful. And sometimes, depending on how sophisticated the sales funnel is, sometimes I'm working with companies really early on and they haven't even developed a sales funnel. But sometimes, depending on where the sales funnel is, they can use our framework as a way to say, this makes sense, or what I find with customers is that XYZ happens. And there can be a dialogue between marketing and sales as far as making sure that this framework fits the insights around the customer.
Got it. Very good.
Yeah. So now we're on to step 5. So we figured out the efficient content that we're going to create. We're going to make it relevant to the customer, and we've now seen some of the content perform. And this might be, maybe it's pieces of content, maybe it's certain pages on the website, maybe it's certain keywords. You can amplify that organic content with paid campaigns and programs. You can also A/B test. If you've got something that's performing, but you think that you can improve it, or you have something that's not performing and you want to improve it, you could A/B test any one of those things: pages, content, keywords. You can also use paid to amplify successful influencer content. So if you have an influencer program as part of your awareness generation engine, you can put paid campaigns into market to amplify that content. And paid channels could include social advertising, it could include search, or it could include events like conferences or webinars. So, these are just some of the examples of things that I've helped companies do, but only after we figured out what content works. That's when we applied the paid dollars to make that organic content work even harder for us.
Got it. As Larry Kim likes to say, one of our keynote speakers, amplify the unicorns, not the donkeys.
Yes. Or you spread yourself too thin. I mean, that's just it. The marketing dollars are limited, and it's getting harder and harder to break through the clutter in these channels. So you need your dollars to work as hard for you as possible. So, stack the deck.
Perfect.
So with Pipmonic, I just wanted to show you what the results were of what we built together. So we focused on who the customer was. We focused on what our awareness generation engine would be, and for Picmonic, it was presentations at schools at the beginning of the school year when kids were just getting to campus and wanting to know what they needed to know. Right, that was the perfect time to have these presentations. And then we also layered onto that social influencers as well, students who had been through the program or upperclassmen who wanted to make recommendations to students that were starting. And then on top of that, we layered our content marketing program, which was developed based on the Relevant Intercepts framework. And then we layered on paid. But the content, how we thought about intent, was key to how we developed this content, and to make sure that we weren't spreading ourselves too thin with the content that we were trying to develop. And so here were the results. And remember, I think I might have forgotten to mention this, there are less than 60,000 medical students in the US, really narrow niche market. There are about 300,000 nursing students in the US, really niche market. So all in all, the entire audience was less than 500,000. So it was really hard to find those people. So to be able to develop a content marketing program that would deliver 20% year-over-year traffic increases for 3 years was pretty good in our book. That was not what we were doing before we developed this program. But the better news was we even increased our conversion rates, because our trial conversion to paid went up 50%. So it meant that we were increasing traffic, but we were also increasing conversion. So we were getting more qualified traffic in. And the overall result, and this was the best news, was that we were able to achieve 30% increases in revenue year over year for 3 years in a row. And that had not been the case prior to our putting this program together. So if you've got a narrow niche market, if you've got way too many priorities and you're trying to figure out where to focus, hopefully the framework that we've walked through will give you the roadmap in order to attack the problem. So here are a couple more templates that I prepared for you. The first one is what I call the content planning template. This is really for the strategist, for the marketing leader, whoever's trying to put together the purpose of the content marketing in the program. These are the questions to ask yourself. Who is the target audience? What is the intended channel? How will we target our sweet spot? How will they consume the content we create? What is their pain? How will the content start to solve their pain and open up that door to a conversation before we can have that conversation about how our product or solution can solve their problem, right? So it's a kind of a two-step thing if somebody isn't problem aware. How will the audience find this content easily, and will others recommend this content? So thinking through all of these questions in the steps that I outlined will help to arrive at the content roadmap that needs to be created. And finally, this is a brief, and you all probably have your own versions of a creative brief, but this is my version. This is how I create clarity for those content creators who are actually going to create the content for me. Who is the target? What is their intent? What is that relevant intercept that we're trying to address? What are the keywords? What is the channel we're going to use? The CTA, maybe the landing page that it's going to point to. And then what will we measure? And this last part is pretty important. Knowing what you're going to measure up front is going to help you make sure that you are putting all the things into the content that you need to in order to ensure that it performs for you and delivers real business results. And I do have a little bit of a template here that you can put together for your own KPI dashboard. The exact things that you'll measure on the left will be different based on your product, your service, your channels, and maybe the way your marketing mix is put together. But these are some of the things that I've measured with various programs in order to ensure that I'm delivering on business results with my marketing programs. And with that, what I walked you through here today is an example of what I do as a fractional CMO for Chief Outsiders. We develop the insights that lead to cost-effective strategy and cost-efficient execution. And I love talking with people about their businesses and their challenges they're trying to solve. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And if you do reach out to me, I will send you a copy of my book that's selling on Amazon. I will send it to you for free. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Byron.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great presentation.